Okay, we're talking with Tommy Keene. And Tommy, I'd like to ask you, you're from Washington, D.C., right?
Actually, Bethesda, Maryland, but all
right,
intents and purposes, Washington, yeah.
Okay, is there any kind of, what is the music scene like in that area?
Washington's always sort of been known for its kind of eclectic little scenes. There's not really a main sort of sound for pop rock and roll music. Right now, well, actually, it's been happening for quite some time. The go-go scene is kind of getting popularized, and DC had a big hardcore scene, which was sort of second to LA. And in the 70s, there was sort of the bluegrass thing, Emmylou Harris came out of there and all that. But they never really had a sound, say, like other cities like Boston or San Francisco or down Atlanta, Athens, that whole bit.
Okay, as far as influences go on your music, I read in your bio that you're into a lot of obscure type bands from the 60s, right?
Not that...
Or not into them, maybe you know.
Yeah, well, not that obscure. It's funny that if those bands came out today, they would be obscure bands. But then they were top 10 hits. That's what's so ironic about what was happening then, what's happening now. I guess how the whole business has changed. I mean, a song like if Friday on My Mind came out, which was, I'm sure, a top 5 smash, it probably wouldn't get played on most of the AOR radio stations.
That was, who was that?
The Easy Beats from Australia. But I'm not really, I wasn't that much into obscure things, just kind of everything was on AM radio, all kinds of pop music from the Beatles to Motown to weird songs like They're Coming to Take Me Away, haha. So it was just sort of a potpourri of pop music. It was all sort of unsegregated. Right? Whereas now you have, I mean, you've got so many different categories and stuff that it's all gets kind of divided, so to speak.
So what, like, I guess, who would you say influenced you, though, as far as that goes? What? I suppose there was a lot of influences, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, the main, the biggies, of course, the Beatles and Bob Dylan and the Stones and the Who, and a lot of lesser-known bands in the 60s, and a lot of groups in the 70s, which is sort of a decade that everybody's kind of putting down now. But there's a lot of great things happening, everyone from, say, early Roxy Music to groups like the Raspberries and Big Star and the New York Dolls and Mott the Hoople, all and up to people, say, in the late 70s, like Television, Patti Smith and Ramones. And there was a lot of, I mean, if you look at it all on the whole as a decade, there was a lot of good, music. So it's influences sort of a potpourri of like the 60s and the 70s combined, I think.
Yeah, people are just coming of age now, sort of musically, and they're looking at the 70s now, because that's their frame of reference.
Right, right. The 70s wasn't all bad. I mean, you look at the bad things like disco, everyone kind of frowns on, and the whole sort of hippie thing, but there were some good things.
All right, now when you listen to the radio nowadays, you're hearing a lot more guitar-based music, and you hopefully will be played on the radio, and you have a pretty guitar-based sound.
Right, right.
What do you think of the return to that form of music? Because it seems to not have, like 2 years ago, you were hearing a lot of, synth pop, that kind of stuff.
It's just sort of, it's like fashion, hemlines come up and down, and I think, of course, rock's always been essentially made for, the guitar has always been an essential element of rock, but it's just sort of, the press is kind of, they like to put labels on things, so now it's, well, guitars are back and ringy, jangly guitars are happening, and in a year from now it'll be something else. So I guess the key is to sort of do what you do and sort of not try to get too pigeonholed into any trend. But you're right, there are a lot of good bands out now playing sort of this guitar-based pop music.
Here's a question we ask, like, just about everybody that comes in here. It's about, excuse me, corporate sponsorship of groups that go on tour, like Levi's and stuff like that. Any thoughts on that? Pro or con?
Well, rock touring is sort of a big, expensive thing right now. big business lately. Well, no one's approached us. I mean, if anyone's interested, we're. No, I mean, I guess I was reading what a lot of people are doing Levi's, you were saying?
Yeah, I think Tom Petty was.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably better than doing, you know, perfume or something. I don't.
All right, that's good. Do you have a video that's just coming out now, right?
Mm-hmm.
For which song is that for?
Places That Are Gone.
Anything interesting you could tell? I haven't seen it yet. I'll be honest with you. It's not out yet, right? Or is it out?
No, we just finished it actually.
Because I was looking for it downstairs and it's not there, so I guess. Anything you want to tell us about, the making of that, or, what you had in mind, what kind of input you had, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, I was really apprehensive about doing a video, and because it's a sort of a delicate issue, you can sort of make the wrong video and maybe come off in the wrong sort of way to the viewer. It's just how you're sort of perceived through film. And a lot of bands I see sort of, I don't know if they were sort of wanted to do the wrong thing or were sort of pushing and doing the wrong thing. But there's a guy at Warner Brothers who's sort of the creative, head of the whole creative division. Anyway, he set me up with this, a young, sort of up-and-coming underground filmmaker out of L.A. His name's Rocky Shank. And we got along really well, and we sort of hit it off, and we both sort of talked about what we wanted to do in the video and what we didn't want to do. And we just wanted to make sort of a classy piece that was sort of inoffensive, yet kind of gave across the right image and was enjoyable. So it was a pretty interesting experience, It's like when you make a record for the first time, a major label album or whatever, if you go and spend a lot of time, you definitely know what to do the next time. It's a learning experience.
What do you think about, it's practically an obligation for a group out in the 80s to make a video. What do you think of that, that groups pretty much, it's an obligation just about now to even get any kind of recognition?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's certainly become a big tool nowadays to sort of sell the group or sell records. It's funny, I was hearing some guy talk, and he was going, well, we used to have to go out on the road and do all these publicity things and promotional stuff, and we used to have to just tour relentlessly, and now you do a video, and it gets shown in rock video clubs across the country, and it's just so much easier and all this, and that's really the way it is. I think that's great. In a certain extent, I think, as far as a live format, you say you have rock clubs that have live videos, or live rock groups and videos. In that extent, I think that may have hurt live music as a medium in clubs. But I think you basically have to do a video if you want to really. It's just such a medium to get across to people nowadays. It is almost an obligation. And I think if you don't, then your chances are really sort of slightly hurt in a way.
All right, now what kind of contribution does Tommy Keene want to make, like in rock and roll? Like if you want to be remembered for anything down the line, what would that be? What are your aspirations?
Well, I'd say first and foremost, songwriting is the biggest challenge to me, so I'd like to sort of be remembered as a good songwriter. But I think the most challenging thing to do would be able to sort of sustain a career over a long period of time and consistently turn out good records at least as good as the ones that put you sort of in a successful position to begin with. And if you think about it, there's really only a couple of artists that have done that consistently. I mean, David Bowie is one that comes to mind. Bruce Springsteen certainly keeps making good records. That's the biggest challenge. You have, excuse me, certain groups, and they'll put out 3 great records, and then they seem to sort of burn out, and they've kind of lost all their spark, so to seem.
There's a lot of people out excuse me, that are watching right now and would like to know who want to be rock and roll stars and want to get started in the business. There's like 15-year-old guys out there watching, playing in their garage. What advice do you have to those people who are watching right now?
Advice do I have? Not to really get too caught up. The one thing is that when everyone starts playing in bands, everyone is so caught up in the whole enthusiasm of it all. And sometimes, although if you lose that, you're dead, but sometimes I find that sometimes we go out and I see young bands and they really don't take it as seriously as they should at a certain point. And there's just a lot of little cardinal rules that, you know, they could break. Sometimes, you know, they play sets that are too long and stuff like that. Did you edit this?
Oh, yeah, plenty of editing involved in this.
I totally blanked out on that question. Forget it.
Well, you know, that wasn't bad.
That was a hard question.
But, like, you know,
I'd have to think about that for a while.
When you got started,
right.
do you think it'd be rougher? It was rougher then than it is now? I mean, you started, when did you really start going and getting a band going and trying to do the thing in the clubs and everything?
Well, I started doing that at a time when it was really difficult. I mean, when I first started to get serious about, well, let's really try to get a band together and write songs and try to do something original, it was very difficult because at the time, say this was when I was about, you know, 15, like 1974, and you couldn't go out and play clubs because you had to play, you know, sort of top 40 stuff. And then later on, a couple years later, it got even worse. You had to play songs by groups like Boston and stuff. And we were kind of doing things that was, I don't want to say we were really ahead of our times, but we were always trying to write these songs and play songs that were sort of precipitated what happened about 3 years later with the whole New Wave thing. We were kind of playing Stones-type songs, you know, pop songs, songs which didn't require a great deal of musical dexterity, so to speak. So, I mean, it was frustrating to not be able to go out and play, and then when that whole thing happened, whatever it was, 77, 78, the next wave or whatever it's called, all of a sudden we thought, hey, oh God, we've been doing this for a couple of years, so. But that's, you know, it's funny because a lot of people just, that was when they first picked up instruments, you know, and so I'd always been playing in bands beforehand. But advice to younger groups, well, I mean, it just sounds cliche, but you just have to sort of stick with it, and it's a long, long road. And I think people tend to get discouraged pretty easily, and you can always tell the ones that get discouraged too soon. They go back to college, or they, you know, get a career in selling insurance or something. But it's the really dedicated people that, you know, that stick with it. I mean, they're the foolish people actually, but. And
are you one of the
I'm
dedicated?
definitely. I mean, I run into people who haven't seen me since I was 17. I'm still doing what I'm doing now, and they're married and living in condominiums with kids and stuff. And they look at me, and I'm still, you know, writing songs in my basement and playing in bands. Although we've gotten to a little bit higher level, but in a way, it's sort of this deferred gratification, you know.
Oh, that's pretty good. Everything we got from you. As far as, since we're in New Jersey here, you think you might want to do a little imitation of Frank Sinatra? According to I hear you do a few imitations, that's what they said. I don't know.
Oh, God.
You don't have to.
And this will come back to haunt me. No, I don't do Frank Sinatra imitations. That just came about because I was watching this telethon one time, or like Jerry Lewis or something, and Frank Sinatra was singing. It was so funny because, you know, the band starts playing behind him, and he comes out and he does this little rap, and he's talking, and it was so funny because he says, and right now I'd like to do a song by Mr. Eric Carmen, you know, and he did Never Gonna Fall in Love Again. But it was just so funny, you know, Frank Sinatra doing an Eric Carmen song. That cracked me up.
And he probably has no idea who that is.
Right,
or anything.
Mr.
Like
Joe Schmo.
Ask him about the raspberries or something.
Right, yeah.
And say, you know.
Right.
So I guess that's about it. did pretty good. Not bad.
Right.
Or-
Sorry, I got a little
That was fine. You did
little
it.
lost. That one question threw me because I just had to start talking, and I thought, I don't know what I'm saying.
Oh, we do a lot of cutting and pasting.
Great,
So,
great.
all right, so what we're going to do now is just do some IDs and stuff.